workers, and to all of the ladies in our church, whether you've ever had a child or not, we want you to have a rose. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate those who are joining us online, wherever you might be. We are always grateful that you come, and on this special day, we want to honor all of the women in our lives. With the Church of the Brethren are committed not only to being a great church, but building great families. We want to provide the tools by which we can become better families, better moms, better dads, better wives, better husbands, children, and of course, grandparents. So let's begin by looking at some women, especially the mothers in our lives. Today, and I've never done this before, today, I want to share a little bit of the life of my mother. Her name is Cynthia Bates, and there's a picture of her. I think that's before she had 6 children, but that's all right. She imparted so much of herself into our lives for my 5 brothers and sisters, as well as myself. Much of who we are is because of the life lessons my mom gave to us. So at each point of the outline, I'm going to share a little bit of my mother as well as some scripture from Proverbs 31. So if you have your Bibles turned to Proverbs, I'm not going to read the entire passage from 10 to 31. It's a wonderful passage, but I'll be going at various different points in it. Did you know that being a mother is tough and rewarding, but doesn't unfold without its unusual moments? Perhaps you heard about the young mother who went upstairs to check on her son Timmy, who was way too quiet. She found him cleaning the bathroom toilet with his toothbrush. She screamed, "Timmy, stop. That's not good. Give me your toothbrush, because it's now dirty and needs to be thrown away." So she went downstairs and threw it in the trash, only to look up and see Timmy holding her toothbrush in his hand, saying, "Here, Mommy, throw yours away. I used it last week on the toilet." Just the yuck. Oh my gosh. To honor the mothers of our church, I want to play a short video. I played it several years ago. It's just a 1-minute clip. It's called Mother's Day Off. It's from Right Now Media, which, by the way, we have paid the rights for it for all of our church. You can go on Right Now Media and see thousands of Bible studies and thousands of lessons. And this is just a funny clip from Right Now Media. All right.
What about...
What in the world's going on?
You know how when you come home every day and ask me what I did today?
Yeah?
Well, today I didn't do it.
What would it be like if our moms and our wives took a day off? What would our houses look like? God has some encouraging and clarifying words for our women. And in a moment or two, we'll be to Proverbs 31, but I want you to get ready for it. So I want to say to all of you moms today that you are more valuable than you probably even know. So Salary.com says that the following is the worth of a mom. A stay-at-home mom works 94 hours a week, and what do you think she should get paid? Salary.com says she should get paid, are you ready for this? $143,000 annually. Basically, she's priceless. And here's the breakdown of how her day works or her week works. For 10 hours, she's the facilities manager. For 3 hours, she's the CEO. For the laundry, she's a laundry operator for 6.5 hours. She's the computer operator for 8.5 hours. She's a housekeeper for 14.5 hours. Daycare teacher for 14 hours. Van driver for almost 8 hours. Janitor for 8 hours. Psychologist / mediator, 8.3 hours. Obviously, you women are priceless to each one of us. I want to share some life lessons. These are some life lessons that my mom imparted to me and to my brothers and sisters. And I want to share them in the context of Proverbs 31. So if you want to get to 31, I'm going to read a lot of passages from Proverbs 31. First life lesson. Work hard and treat people fairly. Work hard and treat people fairly. Proverbs 31 verses 10 to 15 says, a wife of noble character who can find? She's worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. She's like the merchant ships bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it is still night. She provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. And then in verse 17 it says, she sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her task. The job of a godly woman is not for the faint of heart. That video says it all. They are hardworking. My mom was an extremely hardworking person all of her life, and she instilled that same work ethic in each of us. When she was 35 years of age, she decided, after having 5 children, that she would go and become a school teacher. It took her 7 years to get her degree. And in the middle of it, she did a course correction. She was a smart lady. She realized, this is in the 1960s, okay, late 50s, early 60s. My mother was a wonderful, wonderful artist, and her dream was to be an art teacher. But she realized, even back then, that you can specialize yourself out of a job. So rather than pursuing being an art teacher, she pursued early elementary education with an art major. And so she made that switch. It took her 7 years to graduate. By the way, I will say, I think I've said this before, she picked up odd jobs along the way to help supplement the income that my father made. My father was a hardworking guy, as he would say, a glorified ditch digger putting in underground power for the Department of Water and Power in Los Angeles. But after 1 month of teaching, my mother found out she was pregnant. And I'll never forget that day when she told me she was pregnant, and I said, you can't be, you're too old. And she informed me that evidently I'm not too old. But not deterred, she had my youngest sister in May. I graduated in June, and she started back to school teaching in that next fall. Now, she was very, very flexible. She told us all the time, you need to learn to adjust to life doesn't always flow just the way you want it to. So in 1971, you weren't there, but I wasn't there, but I remember my family telling me about the horrible San Fernando Valley earthquake of 1971, 6.6 magnitude. And my mom taught 18 miles from our house. And the freeway to get to her school no longer existed. So she had to take side streets for that 18 miles to get to her school at Sylmar where she taught. Now some of you texted me or Facebooked me on Thursday night and said, "Are you without power? Is the whole town without power? I don't know if I can live without power." One man, who will remain nameless, even blamed his wife and said, "Are you sure you paid the electric bill?" Well, I want you to know my mom taught, because of what the earthquake did to her school, she taught in a modular building, 4th grade children, with no electricity and no bathrooms for 6 weeks, using porta potties. She's tough. Her work ethic also involved how she treated people. Always with respect, practicing the golden rule. She taught us that life was not always fair, but we need to treat each other fairly. And she taught that to my older brother and myself. We were 17 years apart, and she would hand us one apple, and she would say, "I want you to share that apple." And we were young kids, and we would say to Mom, "How do we share it?" And she said, listen to this. Now, I've never forgotten it. She said to us, "One of you cuts the apple, the other one gets to pick which side he wants to eat." Smart lady. That was her negotiation skill, I think, anyway, as I talked about earlier. All right, number 2. Lesson 2. Depend on God and don't sweat the small stuff. Verse 30 says, "Charm is deceitful and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised." This godly woman of Proverbs 31 has her act together. She's humble, but she's confident. That confidence came from a growing relationship with her Lord, which she fed daily. Her eyes were fixed on Him and Him alone. My mother went to great lengths to make sure that we were all well fed in God's Word. My family, when I was 5 years old, joined with 4 other families, and we started Woodland Hills Christian Church on the west side of the San Fernando Valley. But we had no place to meet, so we met in the American Legion Hall. And they wanted to do a vacation Bible school. But the American Legion Hall said, "No, we use the hall during the week. You can't be teaching kids in here during the week." So my mother, being the creative person that she was, decided we would have vacation Bible school at our house and in our neighborhood for the entire church. So all the church would pack up, they'd come to our house, and my mom had the neighbors all primed. 2 of them were Catholics, one was a Lutheran. She had them all primed, and we did crafts in one person's house, and we did lessons in another person's house. We made this giant collage. I must have been 8 or 9 years old. I can still remember this giant collage on a great big chalkboard that you could roll across the room in a classroom. She had it all stretched out, and we did a collage of David and Goliath. She would tell us that life was too short, and it was going to require you to be flexible. And she would always say, "Bobby, don't sweat the small stuff, because most of life is the small stuff. Just learn to be flexible and roll with life and trust God, and you can't go wrong." She demonstrated that when in 1977, she and my dad and my youngest sister, who's now 11 years old, come to visit Brenda and Clark and me in Oregon, and they call up my brother and sister. You can imagine this. Call up my brother and sister and they say, put the house up for sale, we're not coming home. They lived in a 21-foot aristocrat trailer for 6 months, 3 of them, while a mobile home was being built by a friend of ours. Then they moved into the mobile home. I don't think my mother ever went back to California from Oregon. My dad would go down when we would go down for conferences, but they lived for 6 months in a 21-foot trailer, 3 of them, and they taught us what it meant to be flexible. Lesson 3, be a person of high character. Be a person of high character. This godly woman in the book of Proverbs is a person of great character. Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians 4:16-18, therefore, we do not lose heart, though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes, not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. Charles Swindoll famously says, character is who you are when nobody's looking. We need to be people of character. So let me give some subpoints to this. First one would be discerning. And the passage in Proverbs 31 has 3 passages that deal with being discerning, starting with 16 and 18 and then 27. She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She sees that her trading is profitable and her lamp does not go out at night. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. I love how the writer of Proverbs, we know it's Solomon, puts the idea of being discerning. You parents, we parents, teach our children every day how to navigate life. It's part of parenting. That comes with discernment and teaching them how to make good choices. My mother told me as a teenager that my parents' job was to instill in us good character and knowing how to do right from wrong. And then when we are on our own, you'll know how to make the right decisions. She wasn't going to tag along with us. Now, she demonstrated that in kind of an abrupt way for me. So I've told you in the past that when I was getting ready to go to college, they had a pool party, and several of us that were graduating, and I dove in the pool, and I broke 7 vertebrae in my neck. So I was hospitalized for a week, and then for about 3 weeks, school just started, so I was already behind. We had met the doctor 3 weeks later, and the doctor said, because you're going to a small school and the hospital's right across the street, I'll let you go even though it's 1,000 miles away and you have to sleep in traction and all that stuff. Well, I just want you to know my mother didn't suffer from empty nest syndrome at all. She had me on the next plane for Portland, Oregon. That's how fast she got me out of the house. I think it was to make room for the other children in our small house in California. Okay. She was also discerning of our differences, and she knew that each one of us were different. She knew that I loved sports, and she knew that my sisters liked horses. She would notice little idiosyncrasies between each of us. Now, I'm going to reveal something you do not know. My wife knows this, okay? When I was a little boy, and my mother would make me peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, the slice with the peanut butter had to be on the top. I wouldn't eat it if it was not on the top. So if my older brother happened to be making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and he would begin to hand it to me, if the peanut butter was not on the top, she would distract me, and while she distracted me, she told me this, while she distracted me, she'd flip the sandwich over so that I could eat it because she knew I would throw, you can't imagine your preacher doing this, throwing a temper tantrum because the peanut butter was not on top. I just want you to know that. You never thought you would ever know that about your preacher. To this day, I still like the peanut butter on top. Not only is she discerning, she's gracious. This godly woman is generous. She cares. She's not self-absorbed, this lady in Proverbs 31. Her priority's her right. She has joy, and by joy I mean Jesus first, others second, yourself last. Verse 20 says, she opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. My mother taught us to love all people, no matter who they were, where they were from. It didn't matter to her. So we had a Greek lady that lived, old Greek lady that lived across the street, and we had Pedro and his family didn't speak any English. They were next door to us. And we had wonderful barbecues and picnics with all of the neighborhood. We'd bring them all together. When I would come home from college, and in Oregon it's cold, and some people would have to stay over for Christmas for the 2 weeks, and I would say, come with me, I'll take you to Southern California. My mother would house 5, 10, whatever number I brought down to California for Christmas vacation. Her house was always open. It was the place in our neighborhood where anybody could ever come, day or night, you could come. No questions asked. She is also dignified and well-spoken. She clothed herself with strength and dignity, verse 25 says. She can laugh at the days to come. This godly woman is dignified, but she doesn't think too highly of herself. This godly woman can laugh at herself. When I was a young boy, my mother realized that I liked to tease. Now, some of you didn't know that I don't ever tease any of you, I know. And she would say, Bobby, if you're going to tease people and you're going to pull pranks on people, then you need to be prepared to take it. You need to learn to laugh at yourself, not be afraid to laugh at yourself. My mother, again, demonstrated how to laugh at herself. Each one of us in our family liked different things, but my father, his passion was fishing. He loved to fish. So, and I don't remember whether it was for Mother's Day or their anniversary. I don't think it was for Christmas. But my mom would go on our camping trip. The whole family would go camping, and we would fish, and Mom would stay at the tent or whatever, the trailer. Dad wanted to get Mom more involved in what we were doing. So what a wonderful gift he got her. I believe it was for a Mother's Day gift. It was a fly tying kit so she could tie his flies so he could go fly fishing. That's what he got her. And she would tie those flies while my dad and my brothers and sisters and I would go fishing with them. She always could laugh at herself. And she taught us to laugh at ourselves. And I think I'm a pretty vulnerable guy, and I don't hesitate to tell you funny stories about Bob. There are probably more that you're going to hear over the years. All right, verse 26. Not only was she dignified and could able to laugh at herself, she speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. This godly woman is clear-minded and articulate. My mother was not only a teacher in the classroom, she was a teacher and a molder of all of us 6 kids. My dad worked hard putting power in the Department of Water and Power for 30 years. And it was by design, with my mom and dad together, this is how they worked it out. My mom did most of the teaching and parenting of us during the day. She would teach us how to speak, all these word games that you get these advertisements for. My mother was ahead of the time. She had us always doing word games. We'd travel on a trip and we'd be shouting out words. We'd have spelling tests while you're on vacation, though, yet. But she was adamant she would do it. She wanted us to speak properly. I remember asking her, "Mom, where is my ball at?" Do you know what her response was? Right before the at. She taught us you don't end a sentence with a preposition. Do you know how many times in a sermon I write and it ends with a preposition? I go, no, you can't do that. You have to reword the whole blooming thing so it doesn't end with a preposition. She taught me that. One other thing about my mother you need to know, and I probably should invite my wife to come up and talk, but I won't. My mother was honestly the one person in the world anybody could talk to. And my wife, my mom said to her shortly after we got married, "Brenda, if you want to talk in this family, you better jump in with both feet and start talking." Because she's basically a quiet lady. You didn't know that, basically a quiet lady. She would talk for hours and hours and hours with my mother. And they'd sit up into the wee hours of the morning, day after day after day, just talking. Just talking. She always made you feel like whatever your conversation was about, that you really mattered. All right, number 4. Lesson 4, be a woman worthy of praise. Be a woman worthy of praise. Verse 28 to 31. This is something I read often when I'm doing a funeral and a godly woman, I'm doing a funeral for a godly woman. And I will read this passage often. Here's what it says. This is at the end of that great 21 verses about a godly woman. Here's what Solomon says. Her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful, beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. There's no greater tribute that we can pay to a godly mother than to stand up and praise her. Today I've shared more about my mother than I have ever shared in my entire life, about the life lessons that she taught us. And she would tell you, and I want to remind you, this sermon is not about my mother. This sermon is about godly women, of which my mother was one. I've attempted to share a little bit of her life and our life. My mom was a godly woman, and quickly would remind me to tell you she was not perfect. But I want to close today with some thoughts about some other special people. And the conclusion says, God has some special women. And I want to, for just a moment or two, I want to talk about 3 groups of women. First of all, grandmothers. How special are you grandmas? You are so valuable to every home. So there's a cute little story about a grandma and a grandpa who, while on a road trip The elderly couple stopped at a roadside restaurant for lunch. After finishing their meal, they left the restaurant and resumed their trip. When leaving, the elderly woman unknowingly left her glasses on the table, and she didn't miss them until they were about 20 minutes away. By the time they could get turned around, he grew more aggravated, the husband did, just to go and retrieve her glasses, but finally he did. On the way back, the elderly husband became the classic grouchy old man. He fussed and fumed and complained while he scolded his wife relentlessly on the trip. He wouldn't let up for one moment. To her relief, they finally arrived at the restaurant, and the woman got out of the car and hurriedly went inside to retrieve her glasses. The old geezer yelled at her, "While you're there, you might as well get my credit card as well." Grandmas, you're just special. Every one of you are. It's just special. The second group I want to point out are single moms. We heard the story today of a single mom and the struggles of a single mom. And we just want to put our arms around every single mom we come in contact with. And come alongside them and help them and carry them. What a burden they carry on their shoulders for all their kids. We need to uphold them daily. We need to encourage them. We need to inspire them because they inspire us. We need to remember, and I say this often, we need to remember that some of those children in single moms' homes have never had a godly man in their life. So when they come into our children's program, we need men, godly men in there to demonstrate what a godly man looks like. All right, one more group, and we're done. This is for the never moms. Never moms. These are for the moms who could never get pregnant. These are for the ladies in our church who have chosen never to marry. We do not look down on you because you do not have a biological child. We honor all of the ladies in our life every year. But especially for those of you who are never moms, this is a difficult day. And I can remember a wonderful lady in Australia telling me, "I hate going to church on Mother's Day. I'm reminded every day on Mother's Day of what I can't do." What I can't do. Fortunately, after we left Australia, a couple of years later, she and her husband were able to conceive, and they have a wonderful child. But for some people, this is a tough day. Because while we're honoring moms and gushing over everybody, some ladies in our midst, maybe today, have never been able to be a mom, and we're reminding them of what they can't do, and that's not our intent. So we want to honor all of the ladies of our church. And I want to encourage you as you depart today, if you did not get a rose, ladies, please get a rose. If you have somebody close to you, a lady that you'd like to give a rose to, please take them. I think we have a few left. I don't know how many, but take them as we leave. We have a closing song. I want you to